All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive into something pretty wild, I think.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So we've got this whole situation unfolding in Uttar Pradesh, and it's caught the attention of like the highest court in the land.
That's right. The Supreme Court itself.
It all starts with this idea. Okay, imagine you're in UP, right?
Okay.
And there's this disagreement, maybe over some money, like a loan or something.
Happens all the time.
Totally. And you'd think, okay, maybe it gets a little awkward. Maybe there's some legal back and forth, the usual.
Right, some notices, maybe a court case.
Exactly. But in UP, it seems things are going way beyond the usual.
Way beyond.
Because suddenly, instead of just dealing with like lawyers and stuff,
Uh-huh.
you've got the police at your door slacking you with serious criminal charges.
Oh, wow.
And the Supreme Court is like, whoa, hold up. What in the world is going on here?
Yeah, they are not happy about it.
Not happy at all. And to get a sense of just how not happy they are, we're talking about Chief Justice Sanjeev Khanna, along with Justices Sanjay Kumar and K.V. Viswanathan.
A pretty serious bench.
Oh, yeah, big time. And they did not mince words, let me tell you.
So what were they saying specifically?
Well, basically, they're accusing the Uttar Pradesh police of, like, a complete breakdown of the rule of law.
Whoa, strong words.
Right. They even went so far as to say, quote, "What in the name of justice is going on in UP?" End quote.
So they're seeing a pattern here, not just an isolated incident.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like this whole systemic thing where the police are taking disagreements that should be handled in civil court.
Right, like between individuals,
Businesses, that kind of stuff.
the kind of stuff that you'd normally sue over.
Exactly. And they're turning them into full-blown criminal cases.
Which is a huge difference.
Huge. And to kind of illustrate just how absurd this is, there's this analogy that really stuck with me.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine your landlord suddenly decides to like triple your rent,
Ouch.
right? Now, normally you'd either try to negotiate or, maybe start looking for a new place.
Makes sense.
But what if instead of doing that, you could just call the cops and accuse your landlord of like criminal intimidation?
Seriously.
I know it sounds crazy, but that's kind of the logic the Supreme Court is saying is happening in UP.
So basically they're saying the police are overstepping their boundaries.
It's big time. And this isn't just some theoretical problem,
Right.
It has real consequences for people's lives.
Absolutely. And we actually have a real-life example of this.
We do, and it's the case that kind of set off these alarm bells at the Supreme Court.
Okay, lay it on me.
So we've got these two brothers, Debu Singh and Deepak Singh from Gatambud Nagar.
Gautam Buddhagar.
Yeah, and their story really shows how a simple money squabble can turn into this like legal nightmare.
So what happened?
Well, it started with a disagreement with a businessman named Deepak Bahal.
Over what?
Money seems like the usual kind of financial dispute, loans, payments, that kind of thing.
Okay, pretty common.
Totally.
Yeah.
But instead of it going the usual route, civil court,
Mm-hmm.
the Noida police got involved and filed an FIR against the brothers.
An FIR, a first information report.
Yeah, and not just for any little thing, but under some serious sections of the Indian Penal Code.
Like what kind of sections are we talking about here?
Well, they were hit with Section 406, which is all about criminal breach of trust,
Okay.
basically misusing something that was entrusted to you. Then there's Section 506 for criminal intimidation.
So like threats.
Yep.
Yeah.
And to top it off, Section 120B, criminal conspiracy.
Whoa, so they're saying these brothers were like plotting some kind of criminal scheme?
Apparently. And it all stemmed from this money issue with this businessman.
That seems like a really big jump to go from a financial disagreement to accusations of a full-blown criminal conspiracy.
It does, right? And you really got to wonder what evidence the police had to support such serious charges.
It's a question the Supreme Court seems to be asking, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
And the brothers weren't just going to take this lying down.
Of course not. What did they do?
Well, first they tried to get the case dismissed in the Allahabad High Court.
Makes sense.
This was back in September 2024. But the High Court said, nope, not going to happen.
So what then?
Well, that's when they took it all the way to the Supreme Court.
The highest court in the land.
Exactly. And they had this lawyer, Chan Qureshi, representing them.
Okay, and this is where things get really interesting.
Oh, yeah, because Chief Justice Khanna was like, absolutely not. This is not how the law is supposed to work.
So he basically called out the Uttar Pradesh police.
He did, big time. He even said, quote, "Something strange and shocking is happening day in and day out in Uttar Pradesh.
Wow.
Every day, civil suits are being converted into criminal cases. It's absurd. Merely not giving money cannot be turned into an offense." End quote.
I mean, that last part Really sums it up, right?
Totally. He's basically saying, look, not paying back a debt, that's a civil matter.
It might be bad, but it's not a crime in
Well,
itself.
exactly. And the Supreme Court was not messing around.
So what did they do?
They didn't just issue some vague statement, that went straight to the source.
So they got specific.
They ordered the investigating officer, the IO, from the Sector 39 police station in Noida, the one who actually filed the FIR against the Singh brothers,
Wow.
to appear in court personally.
Seriously. That's a pretty big deal for the Supreme Court to get that specific.
Oh, it is. It shows how seriously they're taking this whole thing.
So what happened when the IO showed up?
Well, the Chief Justice basically said, look, you're going to have to explain yourself.
Under oath.
Yeah, he was like, you are directed to come to the witness box and tell us how you made out a criminal case.
Basically saying, justify your actions.
Totally. And he even added, let the IO learn a lesson.
Making it clear that this isn't just about this one case.
Right. It's about sending a message to the entire police force in UP.
That this kind of behavior is not acceptable.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the police who got called out.
Oh, really? Who else?
Well, the Supreme Court had some words for the lawyers in UP, too.
Interesting. What do they say?
They basically implied that the lawyers are kind of overlooking civil jurisdiction. Like, they're too quick to jump to criminal charges instead of exploring the options in civil court.
Which is kind of their job, right? To know the difference.
You would think so, right? It's almost as if they're saying, hey, remember those other laws about contracts and agreements?
Yeah, the ones that are actually relevant to these kinds of cases.
Exactly. And this whole thing really highlights this fundamental difference between civil law and criminal law.
A difference that seems to be getting lost in UP.
It does, and it's a super important difference.
So break it down for me. What's the key distinction?
Okay, so with civil law, we're talking about disagreements between individuals or companies.
Right.
And the goal is usually to get some kind of compensation or to make sure someone fulfills their end of a deal.
So like if someone breaks a contract.
Exactly. Or if there's a dispute over a property or something like that.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the punishment, if you can even call it that,
Right.
usually involves things like paying fines or having to follow through on what you agreed to.
So it's more about resolving the issue between the parties involved.
Exactly. Now, criminal law, that's a whole different ballgame.
How so?
Well, criminal law deals with actions that are seen as harmful to society as a whole.
Okay, I'm following.
We're talking about things like theft, assault, fraud, serious stuff.
The kind of stuff that can land you in jail.
Exactly. And that's the key difference, right? With criminal law, the state is involved.
As the prosecutor.
Yep. And the goal is to punish the offender and protect the public.
So it's not just about resolving a dispute between two people.
Right. It's about upholding the law and maintaining order in society.
Okay, so that's the distinction.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the big deal about blurring that line?
Well, think about it. If any little disagreement can lead to criminal charges, it creates this climate of fear and uncertainty.
Right, because suddenly the stakes are so much higher.
Exactly. And it also puts a huge strain on the criminal justice system.
Which is already overloaded as is.
Totally. And one of the sources we looked at had this really chilling thought.
Oh, what's that?
Imagine a world where a simple handshake deal could potentially land you in jail.
That's scary.
It is, right? Because it means that even the most basic interactions could have these, life-altering consequences.
And it really undermines the whole idea of trust in society.
Absolutely. And the Supreme Court even questioned this lawyer, who seemed to be defending this whole practice of criminalizing civil disputes.
What did they say?
They asked him point blank, just because civil cases take long, you will file an FIR and set the criminal law in motion.
Wow, so they're calling out this idea that criminal law is just a shortcut.
Totally. Because the civil system is slow and complicated, they're just going to bypass it and go straight to the police.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
It is, because the burden of proof is so much higher in criminal cases.
Right.
And the consequences are way more severe.
We're talking about people's freedom being at stake.
Exactly. So it's absolutely crucial to make sure that the criminal justice system is reserved for actual crimes.
Not just disagreements that could be handled in a different way.
Exactly. So where do things stand now with the Singh brothers?
Well, the good news is that the Supreme Court has put a hold on the criminal proceedings against them in the Noida trial court.
So they're not facing those charges at the moment.
Right. However, there's also a separate case against them involving a bounced check.
Ah, so there's still some legal trouble brewing.
Yeah, that case is still going forward under the Negotiable Instruments Act.
Which is a whole other area of law.
It is. But the main point is that the really serious criminal charges, the ones the Supreme Court specifically intervened on,
Right.
those are on hold for now.
That's a relief.
Yeah.
And what about the UP police?
Well, they're definitely under the microscope now.
I bet.
The Supreme Court has given the Director General of Police of Uttar Pradesh 2 weeks to submit an affidavit.
An affidavit.
Yeah, basically a detailed explanation of why they're treating these civil disputes as criminal matters.
So they're going to have to answer some tough questions.
Oh, yeah. And the court will be watching very closely to see how they respond.
And this whole situation, even though it's happening in UP,
Right.
it has implications for everyone, right?
Absolutely, because this fundamental principle of separating civil and criminal law, that's not just a UP thing. That's like a cornerstone of any fair legal system.
Exactly. And if that line starts getting blurred, it opens the door for all kinds of abuse.
Totally. Imagine if anyone with a grudge or who wants to intimidate someone could just file a criminal complaint over a simple disagreement.
Oh, man, that would be a nightmare.
It would undermine the entire system.
And it would make people afraid to even interact with each other.
Exactly, because you never know what might be twisted into a criminal offense.
Right. And one of the sources we looked at pointed out how darkly ironic this whole thing is.
Oh, how so?
Well, on one hand, it's almost funny to picture this police officer having to explain to the Supreme Court how they turned a simple money dispute into a criminal conspiracy.
Yeah, I can see that.
But on the other hand, it's deadly serious because it shows how easily the legal system can be misused.
And how important it is to have checks and balances in place.
Absolutely. The Supreme Court is basically stepping in and saying, whoa, hold on a second.
We need to make sure the law is being applied properly.
Exactly. And that's a good thing because a system where any disagreement can land you in jail,
Right.
that's not a system anyone wants to live in.
Not at all. So to recap, we've got the Supreme Court taking a strong stance against what they see as a pattern of abuse in UP.
Yep.
Where the police are turning civil disputes into criminal cases.
And they're using the case of the Singh brothers as a prime example.
Exactly. And they're not just talking about it, they're demanding answers and holding people accountable.
And the key takeaway here is that criminal law is not a tool for resolving everyday disagreements.
It's for serious offenses that harm society.
And we all need to be aware of this distinction and fight to protect it.
Because a system where anyone can be criminalized over a simple dispute, that's not a system that serves anyone.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
Like, what would it be like to live in a society where every argument, every broken promise could potentially lead to criminal charges?
That would be terrifying.
It would. And what would that do to our relationships, our businesses, our trust in each other?
It would completely change the fabric of society.
It would. And that's why this case in UP, even though it might seem far removed from our own lives, it's actually a really important reminder that we all have a stake in making sure the law is applied fairly and justly.
And that the power of the state is never used to punish people for things that shouldn't be crimes.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we can't take our freedoms for granted and that we need to speak up whenever we see the legal system being misused.
Absolutely. And it also makes you wonder if something like this is happening in UP, could it happen elsewhere?
That's a really good question.
Maybe it's already happening in ways we're not even aware of.
It's definitely something to think about.
And to be vigilant about.
Absolutely. Because the line between civil and criminal matters, that's a line we need to defend.
For all our sakes.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to leave it for today.
A lot to ponder, for sure.
Thanks for joining me for this deep dive. It's been eye-opening, to say the least.
Definitely.
And for all of you listening out there, keep those questions coming and stay informed because knowledge is power.
Couldn't agree more.
Until next time.
Take care.